Marketing to Chinese millennials. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Kitty Boo in Shanghai. If you're marketing to Chinese millennials, consumers born between 1982 and 2003, expect contradiction. This generation was reared by hovering helicopter parents in a highly protected, hyper-attentive manner that reflects the importance of these special children, the product of China's one-child policy, and the great expectations their parents continue to have for their offspring. This generation is often slapped with negative labels like little emperors by those who think they're spoiled and at odds with Chinese traditional values, while others applaud them as being truthful, passionate, and highly engaged. Regardless of your point of view, your brand shouldn't ignore this diverse, educated, and influential shoppers, but you'll need to approach them with the right media and marketing messages. This week on Thoughtful, our experts Shirley Zhou, Angela Xu, and Shann Biglione will share insights to help you understand China's millennial generation. And Karen Ho will share a thought or two about the importance of social media for reaching these young consumers. But first with us in the studio today is Stephen Drummond, Senior Creative iMarketing and Design, Coca-Cola China. Stephen, welcome to our studio.
Thank you.
Coca-Cola makes products for all age groups, but certainly Chinese millennials fall into the prime target. I know even before you joining Coca-Cola, you've been following this generation as a planner for agencies like Lowe and Y&R, and you're even a parent of a Chinese millennial yourself, I believe. So tell us, what's your view on this generation? What are their values and what brands need to know about them?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is the millennial definition is a very broad one, but and what I always try and listen to very closely are Chinese people and their perspectives. They break it down into 80s and 90s. It doesn't sound quite as sexy as millennials, but actually it's probably more descriptive. I think it gives it a bit more detail. I think the key to understanding them is understanding where they have come from and also where their parents have come from in this rapid development through China. So, I mean, what defines both the 80s and 90s generation, of course, is one-child policy and this incredibly rapid change that China's been through. So what we saw from the 80s generation, first generation one-child policy really coming through, the generation that was very, very optimistic, but their parents still had quite conservative traditional Chinese values, and that guided their values and their attitudes. In the 90s, we started to see, of course, a continuation of the one-child policy, but if you like, the emergence of modern parenting coming in, particularly at the first and second tier level, and increasingly so. And that's, I think, opened up from the more conservative, constricted environment that the 80s generation grew up in. We're starting to see in the 90s generation, a much more liberal, freer attitude. It's still quite conservative compared to Western society, but a more opening up of how to raise kids, encouraging kids to be more artistic and play more sports and do more interesting things, not just studying.
This generation is very eager to share information. They're eager to express, and also they're becoming more and more resourceful in terms of acquiring information in this technology era. So Coca-Cola, in a way, perhaps cannot rely on an iconic brand and a product. It may have been in the past. You need to make yourselves appeal to this generation. How do you do it?
We're still on the road to being an iconic brand here. We know that. It's all about constantly being relevant to the lives of this generation. So with the more isolated child, as you said, the fact that this generation is so expressive online speaks volumes, because they are less expressive in the real world. So that is their outlet. I mean, there are more creators, more expressions coming from teenagers in China than there are almost anywhere in the world. But that gives us an insight into the need for this outlet, the need to connect with other people. It's of course much easier socially to do that under a pseudonym or an avatar, or just doing it outside of the real world. So as a brand, we try and tap into that and help kids through that.
Is Coca-Cola shifting budget away from traditional advertising and more throwing that into digital and social, particularly for the China market, or
I mean, well,
in campaigns towards this group?
Right, that's happening inevitably. I mean, there's obviously more investment in social. For us, we have what we call a 70-20-10 model of creative and media investment. 70 being the tried and true media bets like television. Now,
the traditional media.
The traditional media. Now, a few years ago, we would have considered some aspects of social to be in the 10%, and that tends to be more experimental. The 2013 nickname bottle campaign taught us that actually social can drive mass awareness. We got enormous amount of awareness just at the start of the campaign, just through the social mechanisms. And that has naturally changed the way we see the landscape. What we don't do, however, is just simply shift money between TV and social or iMarketing. We look at how all the pieces fit together. So we understand that different media forms are complementary and they should be connected as well. So when we campaign plan, it is genuinely agnostic of worrying about which is the latest trendy media, which is going to do the best job at the particular time as we tell a campaign story, and that can change. So television still performs a very important role for us.
Stephen, thank you for being on Thoughtful China today.
Thank you.
Let's take a break. Then we'll hear from Karen Ho, Managing Director, Digital at MEC China, about the role of social media in reaching Chinese millennials.
I've been watching Thoughtful China ever since it started in China, and it taught me a lot in terms of advertising and marketing, but now I see that it also taught me a lot in terms of, you know, the different new media and also all walks of life.
I call the millennials the kids because they're at least 1 decade younger than I am. To me, marketing to them, it goes beyond about just being informative. It's really about giving them meaningful and useful information. These kids grew up with computers, cell phones, and all other channels to source like different things in the World Wide Web. We cannot just fool them with sugarcoating our brand offer and product benefits. They don't buy it that way. So to me, a guide experience is something that what these kids would be looking for. You give them a stage, a platform with choices to experience the good and bad. These kids are always curious. So even if it's like for a sports and apparel brand, for example, right now they're always about like ethic endorsements, sports celebrities. Giving them a course, giving the kids a course to believe in your brand would actually be an interesting approach. It is to allow them to follow and explore, to believe in themselves as well as the brand, as well as to contribute. I'll give you also an example of like what I meant by guide experience. It's for the sports and apparel brand. It's really about how you leverage your celebrity endorsement. Brands used to celebrate what the athletes have become, but rarely explain why they choose that specific person. Each person coming from a happy or sad background has his own or her own story. So before they have become successful, the millennials would appreciate to hear these stories, hear about these stories. They can get inspired from it, and they feel more connected to the ethics as well as to the brands who are willing to bring these stories into their lives.
Thanks, Karen. We're back in our studio today with Shirley Zhou, Planning Director at Young and Rubicam, Angela Xu, Digital Manager at Labbrand, and Shann Biglione, Head of Strategy at ZenithOptimedia China. Welcome to our studio.
Good morning.
We're talking about marketing to Chinese millennials today and how they're different from the older generation, and also what brands need to take away to try to reach them. So what are some of the main differences of value of this generation? For example, financial security versus personal happiness, and work stability versus pursuing dreams, supporting their families versus individualism.
What I find fascinating for this generation is they kind of are tasked with redefining the rule book of China. They come from a way of doing things, and they kind of face with both a great freedom to go and explore things, and there's less boundaries than they potentially were before, but at the same time there's great constraints that they have to live with, both cultural constraints but also economic constraints that they have to face. So it's quite interesting to see that for them they're becoming much more pragmatist about what they can do, and I think this is something that is impacting a lot the way they're interacting with each other, with businesses, with employers as well, and with brands, of course.
Comparing the 90s to the 80s, what are some of the key findings?
For us, the post-90s and post-80s, there are maybe two things are very different. So one, although they all talking about individualism, but actually the way they behave and the way of expression is totally different. So for the post-80s, their kind of individualism is more about like being different from others. I want to be different. I just don't want to do the same thing with others. Yeah, but for post-90s, their kind of expression is more about, just really follow my heart. What is something I want? What's something I'm passionate for? So it's really to cover who they really are. So actually, I think the reason behind is really because of the things, the way they grow up is different. So like for post-80s, when they were kids, they learn about this world through kind of teacher, right? Through parents and kind of through textbooks.
Mm-hmm. It's still very much of a public school system.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They were told, that the world is like that, and you should do this or do that. So that's the way they form their kind of point of view of what will. But when they grow up, they go to the college, they go to the society. Oh, finally they found, things look totally different. It's not the way that my parents or teacher told me so. So actually, I could be different, and I want to be different. So that's the kind of the inner voice just coming out. So that's why their kind of individualism is a little bit, we say, rebellious. It's really to, I just don't want to be the one that you guys told me to be.
So it's kind of like trying to be different for the sake of being different.
Right.
And being told one thing growing up, and then finding a different world when they grow up and say, hey, look, I'm done with the thing I know before. Now I want a new chapter.
Yeah, exactly. Although it sounds a little bit superficial, but just imagine it's the first time that for Chinese young people really to say no to the traditions, right? It's still quite meaningful, right? But for post-90s, it's kind of different. They grow up, they were born into the internet world, right? Not only from the parents or school, they kind of learn about this world through internet by themselves, maybe together with their friends, right? They kind of just explore things by themselves.
What could marketers do to try to reach this group? What could brands do?
I think there's a variety of things that can be discussed when we talk about millennials. We talk very often about having brand purpose, having content that is able to kind of resonate with them. We talk about being more human as brands as well, because I kind of like to talk to them about like the see-through generation for me. They're the people who they've seen things, they can identify what's true and what's not true. There's promises that are not going to be there for them.
So they're smarter consumers?
I think they're very smart. We talk about them as being sometimes less loyal, but I don't think it's a lack of loyalty. It's just they're a bit more pragmatic about what they buy. And if anything, I actually think that the the value of brands might be going down. The importance will be there, don't get me wrong, you're going to need brands and strong brands, but the actual value of it is going to potentially be a question over the next few years, because it's not that they're empowered, it's that they're much more ready to question things, and a brand can be done and undone with a matter of 2 years nowadays. So it's going to be a real question for the brands. But what I see at the moment, what I find quite interesting, is when we ask them, you know, what kind of brands do you find really inspiring, what kind of people do you find inspiring? Every time, it's not so much that the brand is deeply meaningful or making the world a better place, or is that they have an influence on the world that they are in. So if you think of Apple, they perceive that, you know, Steve Jobs is someone who was ready to change the world. If they think of Xiaomi, there's clearly something that's happening with Xiaomi, something that's even kind of become part of the China pride as to what we can be as a brand and as a country even. So there is clearly something for me about them seeking this influence. And I think that's something that also shows in some of the talents that they like, because they talk to us about Han, for instance, influential writers, and they like people who leave their mark on the world, who create something a bit new, a bit different. And I think from this perspective, it doesn't have to be deep, it doesn't have to be emotional, it doesn't have to be something that's strong, but it has something that makes them feel like you are part of my generation who's going to try to change the way things are, who's going to be defining what's going to happen in the future.
I find it interesting, the three examples you gave, Apple, Xiaomi, and also Han, right? And then all three, Han is a brand himself,
yes,
involved three individuals.
Yes.
And then to some extent, all of them stood for what the 90s wanted to have or wanted to become, in a way. You know, Steve Jobs and Han, and there are certain things that the 90s want for themselves, and they kind of look up to these people. So am I getting it right that you essentially are saying, apart from a strong brand story, you actually need a good product to appeal to this group?
Product is essential, and I think, you know, in marketing circles we very often talk about all those things and we forget that the heart of things is having a great product, because as they're able to see through, they'll be able straight away to tell if your product is good or not. And you know, the power of social media, e-commerce, these things mean that there's a much more availability, there is more access to consumer reviews and so forth. And this is not so much things that are influenced by your marketing as they are by your product. And I think having a really strong, great product is really at the heart of what's going to be needed. And that's potentially one of the reasons why Apple was able to strike both things, because they had the visionary person who was able to inspire people, and they had the products which made them people think that, you know what, they really are putting their money where their mouth is. Like when they're making a product, it is something that I know is reliable. So
but Angela, do you agree with that? I mean, what could marketers do?
I feel like
the product, we need a good product, but what could marketers do in this sense?
Yes, first of all, the product power should be the essential. So put aside about the product, we can say, okay, for me, I feel like 3 key things that brands can do. One is that they should show consumers that they understand them. That's very important, because for those post-90s and post-80s, they're a kind of generation who still seek about recognition and also about the sense of understanding. And also the second one is that brands need to let them show that they value their opinions. That's how post-90s they show a lot in the internet right now, because no matter if you give them a platform or a place to share their voice or opinions or any ideas, it could be you just ask them, can you ask them to contribute their opinions about the next product that could be on promotion, or it could be any piece of advice that can improve the product optimization. So that's the thing that they really want. They want a sense of engagement. They want their opinion to be valued. And the last one is kind of resonate with what Shann just shared. It's about the authenticity. It's better that you don't tell them a story and everything about rosy or it's just fake. They will tell about it because they are so digital savvy, they will find it sooner or later. So it's better that you just tell them who you are and who you offer. And if they like you and they need what you offer, then they will be your loyal consumers.
So is it easier almost marketing to this group then? The brands have to be true to themselves, and then you deliver a good product that's pretty straightforward, and then the messaging just have to be sincere and heart-reaching.
I don't know if it's easier. It's something brands are not used to do sometimes. And you know, I think most of the rules we talk about when we talk about marketing to millennials, to be honest, they're more the difference between bad advertising and okay advertising. But then there's a question of how you transfer from okay advertising to excellent advertising. And that's something that the things we talk about, the generic terms, we talk about purpose, influence, and these are, okay, they'll get you to the good guys potentially, but then if you want to be the great guys, there's always a sense of alchemy, something a bit, metaphysical to how this is going to happen, something a bit magical to it. That being said, there's one thing I don't entirely agree with, and to be fair, this is something we as an agency also sometimes claim, but the second point, which is about opening up to them and letting them kind of be part of defining things. I do think it works. I'm not going to say it doesn't work. And Xiaomi is the best example of this. If you look at Xiaomi, this is the brand that exemplifies how you can actually get participation to better your product. But I always kind of get back to the Apple example. Apple is the most ivory tower company you can think of in the world. And they've been able to reach the top and be seen as the most influential one. So when we talk a lot about, trying to having the consumers to engage with our campaigns, with our brands and so forth, I don't know. It's a real question mark for me as to if it really is the way to do it. Over time, you know what? It might be seen as a weakness. Because when you look at people, and we look at, I was talking about people have an influence, whether it's people or brands, these are people who have a very strong opinion. These are brands, that have a vision, and they're going to tell you, this is my vision, and you're going to have to fit to my vision.
It's very strong messaging.
Yeah, so I think we have to be kind of careful about the whole democratization of the way products and brands are made and built, and even sold and marketed. So I think it's one thing where we're going to have to find the nuances. And I think we have to be a bit careful about this.
Just now we talked about how the advertising currently facing this age demographic is more like okay advertising and bad advertising. Is there any good examples that you want to share? Not just in terms of advertising, but is there any good examples of brands successfully adapted themselves and had come up with good messages for this group to reach them?
For me, I always think that Coca-Cola in China, that they really did a pretty good job. Their advertising is not only selling an attitude, like empty kind of belief or something. They really, interact with consumers to, make consumers part of their advertising. So from 3 years ago, I remember their campaign is kind of nominate the happiness creator around you. So it's really involve everyone, you and your friends, can interact together. And also from the year before, they started the sharing the nickname bottles and also sharing the music bottles. It's really something that, is to make this brand and product not only a product, but something you can, share with your friend, and you can make kind of, because it's post-90s, they really want to amplify the current life, right? So they really want to inject a lot of their personal emotions or personal trails into this kind of brand or products. If you're in, maybe there's more than one way, but in a certain way, you can make it a product not only a brand of you, the brand owners, but part of their lives, or part of their personal things. So they're going to like it. So for like the music bottles, if a teenager show this bottle to maybe to his girlfriend or a buddy, so it's kind of this music word really kind of say something for him. So that's allowed brand and consumers to really have a very active kind of interaction.
I mean, Coke it's kind of the classic example, and I'm kind of curious to see how long they're going to be able to sustain that with the open happiness angle. I think what's great about the open happiness, it was very single-minded. People understood it. It was easy to express in different ways, and there's been a few iterations of it. I don't know how it's going to pan out in the long term, and we'll see how truthful they are able to remain to that message, to be completely honest. It's not so much of a brand, but a business, but I think Alibaba is one that's kind of triggered a lot of fascination for a lot of this generation. We've talked about the sense of possibility, and I think Jack Ma is someone who's been able to embody that. He's kind of become their own Steve Jobs in a way. And this is where I think Coke, maybe in the longer term, might not have the same genuine aspect. Coke is still, I think, potentially a bit fabricated compared to some companies like Alibaba, for instance, because they have the visionary leader that's going to be able to embody this. There's going to have this human face that people can associate with the brand. I think it'll be quite interesting how brands are able to go and navigate that aspect, how much people can connect with some of the individuals of that brand and the vision that brand has, not just the message and the platform it uses, but where it really goes on a genuine level and how it's going to help their society be a better place.
Last question. In short words, looking forward to this generation becoming older with more spending power, what should brands be doing now to connect?
First, you need to have the great product with innovation power, and then what you need to do now is maybe just keep an impression with the generation right now. You just tell them, okay, I have this product, this is great, and I just want you to know about this. And maybe like 5 years ago, they will know, okay, this is what I want. It's like much like Apple. Maybe the first generation Apple coming out, I don't have the money to buy it. It's like 5K RMB. I just cannot afford it. But after I get my money, I will know, okay, this is the product I wanted to buy, this is the brand that I trust with, so I'm willing to spend that money on it.
Yeah. So in short, plant the seed.
Yes.
Well, Shann, Angela, and Shirley, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Youku, Tudou, and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo, WeChat, and Twitter, and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.